From Team GSP wiping out Team Koshek to the legendary cast of Season 1, here are TUF's greatest teams of all time, revealed. If you're a fan of MMA, you know how important the Ultimate Fighter is for UFC. The sport itself may not have survived without this brilliant show. And when we talk about the greatest teams in TUF history, you gotta include Team GSP from TUF Season 12. It was back in the old days when athletes had to fight immediately, even before they make it into the house. Kinda made it more exciting from the very first episode since we knew we'd be getting the best of the best talent. Not to mention, Georges St-Pierre was on top of the world at the time, and the way he picked and handled his team, it really showed us why he's so great. Team GSP included fighters like Michael Johnson, Jonathan Brookins, Spencer Page, and Alex Caceres. George tricked his opposing coach, Josh Koshek, and made him pick the wrong fighters. Things didn't look good for Team Koshek from the beginning. Only 3 of their fighters made it to the quarterfinals, and it only got worse from there, as only 1 guy from the yellow team was in the semis. Safe to say, it was a whitewash right from the start, and the final was between 2 guys from Team GSP Johnson, who was George's first pick, and Brookings, who went on to win the tournament and a 6-figure contract. Now, as impressive as this was for the Canadian icon, he also brought in an incredible coaching staff along with him. Imagine trying to get into the UFC, and you've got guys like Firas Zahabi, Greg Jackson, John Danaher, and Freddie Roach helping you out. That's a legendary lineup of coaches, and I didn't even get to the great Jean-Charles Skarbowski, the Muay Thai legend who beat the heck out of every fighter in the house. It's hard to find a team that performed better than that. But in Ultimate Fighter Season 17, Team Sonnen showed up against Team Jones. The former title challenger Chael Sonnen has coached TUF twice, and I gotta be honest, I was confused as to which of his teams should be talked about, as Chael's performance as a coach was outstanding. We all know that man can talk, but he can also motivate the heck out of fighters, which was why his team got the results that they did. The middleweights were competing for the contract during that season, and Chael's team had some future stars, like Kelvin Gastelum, Luke Barnett, Zach Cummings, and of course, Uriah Hall, who'd already become a star while he was on the show. Both teams had a lot of talent, but I'd say it was Chael's words. That got his fighters to the next level. Because if you've watched that season, you'd notice that many guys on Team Sonnen improved a lot as the show went on. The competition was intense, and both teams had the same guys qualifying for the quarter and semifinals. But the tables were turned as the 2 semifinalists from Team Sonnen, Uriah and Gastelum, both won their fights. And so we already knew who the better team was before the finale. At the time, everyone thought Uriah would be the next big thing at middleweight, and most people had him winning the entire tournament easily. But Gastelum had some other plans, as he shocked the world by beating Hall in the finale and becoming the Ultimate Fighter. The best part was that Kelvin was the last pick on the show, and he went on to win the whole damn thing. Uriah went on to do great things in the UFC though, and retired right after COVID. Meanwhile, Gastelum became one of the most exciting fighters and pushed Stylebender to his limits in their title fight, which might be one of the best clashes of all time. But if we're talking about stars coming out of TUF, we have to talk about Team Pulver against Team Penn. When the UFC legend BJ Penn was set to face Jens Pulver, the Hawaiian kept going after his fellow coach. It was clear that the 2 former champs didn't get along, but Pulver tried to keep it peaceful and focused on getting the wins without getting involved in all the shenanigans. This is ironic, as you could argue that TUF Season 5 was all drama, but don't let that take away from Jens's performance as a coach. With guys like Corey Hill, Cole Miller, and of course, Nate Diaz in his squad, the former champ did pretty well, which wasn't an easy task at all, as Team Penn had future stars like Gray Maynard, Joe Lazan, and Matt Wyman. Not to point any fingers, but BJ initially asked everyone who'd want to be on his team, and nearly every fighter raised their hand. Since Penn was a big star at the time, you don't want to lose after making a move like that. The competition was competitive up until the semifinals, after which Diaz and Manny Gamburian wiped out Team Penn, with Nate ultimately winning the show and becoming the biggest star to come out of TUF. The season itself was also very entertaining, with Andy Wang getting kicked off Team Penn, and all the pranks and fights inside the house that even got a few athletes kicked out. Even Nate was in quite a few scuffles. So if you haven't watched that season, I definitely recommend it. That doesn't mean the next seasons weren't any good. Team Faber looked spectacular against Team Cruz during Season 15 of The Ultimate Fighter. Like Sonnen, I had to think about Uriah Faber, too. The UFC Hall of Famer has coached the show twice. And even though the season with Conor McGregor's a lot more famous, it was Season 15 against Dominic Cruz when his team shined the brightest. Team Faber had a pretty good row of fighters, including Chris Saunders, Andy Ogle, Raging Al Iaquinta, and the winner of the show, Michael Chiesa. That's a badass lineup. As for Team Cruz, they had a few good names like James Vick and Justin Lawrence. The two teams performed spectacularly throughout the season, and even in the semifinals, it was dead even. Until the two stars of Team Faber, Raging Al and Chiesa, took care of the competition, with the California Kid winning the competition before it even ended. The finale was pretty wholesome, as fan favorite Chiesa got the win and became the Ultimate Fighter. It was important for Michael to win, as he was told his father passed away during the competition. Athletes on the show aren't allowed to have any outside contact, but Dana allowed the Maverick to be with his family during such an emotional time. Everyone would have understood him wanting to leave the show, but Chiesa's dad told him to win the competition, which is exactly what he did. Raging Al did pretty well for himself after the show too. The man went on to challenge for the undisputed belt, and he became the only person to go 5 rounds with the great Khabib Nurmagomedov. Chiesa currently fights in the welterweight division, and the alumni of Team Faber from Season 15 are still shining. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I went through the greatest TUF teams without including the OGs. Because we wouldn't be here without Season 1 when Team Liddell won in both divisions. Looking back, you can see how many legends we got from the season that kicked things off. UFC Hall of Famers Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell served as the two coaches. And check out the fighters as well. Team Liddell had Josh Koscheck, Kenny Florian, and the two winners, Forrest Griffin and Diego Sanchez. Team Couture was filled with future legends too, like Stephan Bonnar, Mike Swick, and Nate Quarry. Now, as we all know, the fight between Griffin and Bonnar during the finale saved the entire company. People tuned in as the fight was going on, and the ratings went up during the fight, which saved UFC's deal with Spike TV. Even better, both Forrest and Stephan won 6-figure contracts and earned themselves a pot in the UFC Hall of Fame. As for the middleweights, Kenny Florian and Diego Sanchez fought, and Sanchez got a first-round TKO. But Florian's been doing pretty well for himself since then, both as a fighter and an analyst. Griffin went on to win the light heavyweight title and works with the UFC even today. Looking back, we've had some great teams on TUF that we should have appreciated more, and with Season 31 coming out in 2023, I have a pretty good feeling that Team Chandler would have to be on our list too. Well, there you have it, MMA fans. From Season 1 producing future Hall of Famers to Team GSP dominating the competition. Those were TUF's greatest teams of all time revealed.